Calls to action, or CTAs, is when you ask your viewer to do something that benefits both you and them. But where is the best place in your video to put it to get the most response? The way I see it is there are 4 places in a video that you could put your call to action. The beginning, the middle, the end, or not at all. Let's consider the middle option for a minute. So your job with an introduction is to get somebody into the heart of the video and then to basically back them up and say, okay, but we need to start here. And then give them a progression that eventually gets them to the end. You want to get them to invest fully into the video, whatever the topic is. If you put a call to action directly in the middle of your video, you are causing an interruption that people, if they are invested in your content the way that they should be, are not going to like. I would say that it's fairly safe to say that it shouldn't go in the middle of your video. If somebody is truly invested in your content, most likely they will simply skip ahead to get out of it, or they may just simply leave the video to avoid it altogether and go find something else to watch. Okay, so let's go to the beginning of the video. The whole point of content is to deliver value to your audience, right? You want to help them in some way that you can improve their lives. That could just be for a couple minutes. But you have to give before you can take, and you have to give more than you take. When you ask at the beginning of a video, you are doing one of 2 things. One is you are asking before giving value, and people don't care anymore. They may watch your video, they may skip it, they may click off because they feel like you're just asking. Or number 2, it's going to put that idea of, let's say, subscribing, as that will be the example I use for most of this video, in their head as before they watch the rest of the video. Now, the difference between these 2 is the delivery. Let me give you an example. So I was watching a podcast, and I really liked how it was a video podcast, and I really liked how it not only introduced the podcast, this particular episode, but also how the host delivered his like and subscribe call to action, which was at the beginning of the video, just before they got into it. So it immediately opened up with the members of the podcast plus the guest, and the guest was telling a story which made the rest of the group laugh. And we have had no context as to what this story was about, what was going on, or really entirely what the episode as a whole was. We knew who the guest was, which was in this case meant to be the draw. Then that was maybe about 20 seconds. So from there it went into short clips that introduced the podcast as a whole, that showed various guests that they had, showed various moments that were particularly memorable. And then it opened to a proper introduction, where clearly the cameras had been rolling for a few minutes beforehand, and they were the people on the podcast before the guest was introduced and was really actually there. They were simply just talking. And because of that, the podcast opened incredibly naturally and organically, that allowed them to introduce the guest, to introduce kind of what was going on, but also it naturally led to the idea of like and subscribe. Now, here's where the delivery part comes in. The way that the host asked to like and subscribe, it was not the most important part of the video, by far. In fact, he said it very quickly, very efficiently, and it was over and it was done. Like, it was just like a reminder, like, hey, if you want to, it's here, and, we can just move on. Like, I've said my piece, we can go. This is not important at all. And that's the key, I believe, or at least one of them, to the delivery of a call to action before the video. He hasn't quite given the value, but he's given the promise of value. And he's not made it so that there's so much pressure on the viewer to like and subscribe. Instead, he's just simply planting the video, and then from there, he introduced the guest, and it started flowing. And believe it or not, this idea of putting something in your head to remember later actually has a lot of scientific backing. Where, it's like when you get a new car and, you start noticing like that color of car more often. Or you will start noticing that particular model on the road as you're driving more often. It's because that's what's in your head at the moment. With this kind of idea, with this method of a call to action, they're putting it in your head so that once the value's been given, it's still kind of there. Even though you might not consciously remember it, you're still going to be hopefully more likely to like and subscribe to that video. One of the biggest benefits, I believe, to having a call to action at the beginning of the video versus the end is that more people are going to see it / hear it. Because people are likely to drop off at various points in your video before reaching the end. So this means that more people are going to hear it. But like I said, the only difference between losing people at that moment and gaining people at the end is that is really your introduction and how you approach the call to action. So let's go to now having them at the end of the video. A call to action at the end of the video means that you're focusing on the content. So let's say that your introduction is good enough to get people who want to see the content to stay, but not really much more. It's just kind of but it got people to stay long enough. That means the people who stayed, who enjoyed your content, who stayed to the end of the video, are the people who actually really want to see your content. These are the people who have stayed basically through the highs and lows of whatever the good and bad parts of the video were and said, okay, this was actually a good video. And they made it to the end, which your call to action was then waiting for them to be considered. People also tend to remember the very last thing that was said. So if your call to action was the last thing to be said, then they're more likely to go do it. They're saying, hey, I really did enjoy this video. I'm gonna go like it right now. Or I'm gonna go subscribe right now. So let's look at the fourth option of completely omitting calls to action. These days, we hear a lot, like and subscribe, buy my product, do this, do that, please help me, I want this. It gets overwhelming a lot. So those people who have chosen to completely omit calls to action are those who are hoping that the natural course of social media, because people do understand how social media is supposed to work. You watch my content. If you like it, you hit a like. If you want to see more of it, you follow or subscribe. They're hoping that kind of mechanism takes over automatically without a reminder. There is something to be said about a reminder because some people may not necessarily think about it. And to some people, it really may not matter if you do like or follow or subscribe to their channels. And if somebody does choose to do so, that it becomes much more of a deliberate decision that they gave the time to think about it and consider it and consider what they were getting themselves into. So like I said, subscribe was kind of the example that I used a lot of in this video, but in reality, this applies to every kind of call to action. A call to action can be a like, can be a subscribe, can be a follow, can be a buy my product. And you have to remember that some are much bigger than others, and you have to treat them as such. So asking for a like is not nearly the same as asking for buy my product. So you have to be aware that you have to give more value than you take. So you have to give a lot of value before you can say, hey, buy my product. I think it could be helpful to you. So if you keep that in mind, if you keep in mind, where and how you approach a call to action, that will be at least the very first step of a successful one. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.